Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The View, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The View. The View is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kiana Dene, and I am excited to be one of your co-hosts on The VU, as I like to refer to it in my Minnesota accent, Voices of Unitarian Universalism. Today we have a juicy show prepared for you to be in dialogue around to be in dialogue and advocate, cheerlead, support, and love on our trans community, trans friends, and trans family. So we invite you into this dialogue and this conversation. We're going to get right into it. As I said, my name's Kiana Dene. I am in lovely, amazing Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is also the home of the Potawatomi people, also land that was worked with Black and Brown labor. Right now, I can see buds on trees and green grass, but I have been greeted with the information that we might get up to 8 inches of snow tomorrow. And my Midwest heart that does not put away the shovel, has not put away the salt, that knows the drill, still is like, will there be bread at the store by the time I get there when this is over? So that is where I am at. I'm going to pass it over to my friend DC so we can do the intros and get into the meat of this, or vegan meat, whatever you prefer, of the day. DC.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I am DC Fortune. I am coming to you from Northumberland, Pennsylvania, the home for the final years of Joseph Priestley's life, here on the banks of the Susquehanna River and the traditional home of the Susquehanna people. It is the weather's drunk. It's, it's up, it's down, it's sideways. There are buds, there are flowers, and there's snow in the forecast. So, it's March. Like, that's what we do. But I'm looking forward to today's show. We've got some awesome guests. I'm going to hand it over to Aisha, and she can tell us what's going on up there. Oh, Michael first. Michael.
Good day, everyone. I'm Michael Tino, one of the members of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. Happy to be here on the VU, where with these wonderful folks. Coming to you from Peekskill, New York, in the Hudson Valley of New York, the land of the Kitchewan and Wappinger bands of the Lenape Nation, where we had our first measurable snowfall of the winter on February 28th. Because we have not had snow yet, and so the crocuses were blooming and the daffodils were budding, and now they're all under 5 inches of wet snow that is melting. It's a beautiful sunny day here, and glad to have it go away. It was nice to see it. It'll be nice to say goodbye to it. Aisha Hauser, how are you?
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser, and I am on the land of the Coast Salish people, the Duwamish specifically, and also known as Seattle, Washington, where the weather is always drunk. But today it is a kind of more stereotypical gray, raining day and chilly and cold. I lived in North Dakota for a year, and so that was it. Did not stay longer because the snow there starts in October and doesn't thaw until maybe April if you're lucky. So just reminiscing about that after hearing about all the snow you're getting, Kiana, Danae, and all of y'all in the storm line. So I am also very well, I'm excited about our guests because we serve on the Liberal Religious Educators Association board together. I am really sad about why we need to mobilize because this country can't stop behaving in shitty ways and horrific ways. So I am currently until June, and I think for the past, 18 years through the pandemic, I've been the LREDA president. And I am now going to be passing the mantle. What's the just beauty and privilege of this leadership to Katharine Childs, who is a religious educator in Canada, and Tim Atkins, who is a religious educator in Oklahoma, are our two guests. And again, also members of the LREDA Board. So I'm going to send this over to Katharine. Welcome. And we are very privileged to have you both with us today. And thank you for joining us. Katharine Childs.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us to be on The View today. My name is Katharine Childs. My pronouns are they and them. And in addition to serving as the president-elect of LREDA, I am also the director of religious explorations at the Unitarian Church of Montreal here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, where it is K. So fortunately for me, the temperature conversion's real easy today because it's bang on 0. So it is 32 degrees here. It is snowing. There's still lots of snow on the ground. There will be snow on the ground well through March. And that's how we like it, because if there's snow on the ground in March, that means climate change hasn't gotten us completely. But as I said, thank you so much for having us on The View here today. We'll be getting into talking a little bit more about why we're here, but the thing that I wanted to bring everybody's attention to at the top of the show is that just yesterday, LREDA released an open letter addressed to our faith movement, to the UUA, to our congregations, and to our membership, asking folks to mobilize around opposing anti-trans legislation that is making its way through legislatures across the United States, especially across the South. But certainly as trans folks, none of us are immune to the emotional impacts of those pieces of legislation, even if they're not being proposed in the jurisdictions where we live. I know certainly for myself, it's sometimes real easy to say, this anti-trans stuff is your problem, Americans. But it is certainly not a problem in only one place, and it does affect us all. And I am really proud of the work that our LREDA board has done to show up for the folks in our movement, the folks in our congregations, and the folks across our society who need the life-saving message of Unitarian Universalism. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. And now I'm going to invite Tim Atkins in Oklahoma City to tell us a little bit more about what's happening there, and especially why this push is important to him and to his congregation.
Atkins, and I serve as the Director of Lifespan Religious Exploration at the First Unitarian Church of Oklahoma City. That's a whole lot of syllables. I also serve as the Secretary of LREDA, and I serve as co-chair of the UUA nominating committee. And in my past, I served as a religious educator in Jersey and in the DC area and on the UUA board. I've been a professional religious educator for a decade now. I moved to Oklahoma City during the start of the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, summer of 2020. And one of the reasons why I wanted to move to Oklahoma was I feel like this is where we need to be. We need to be in these conservative areas doing our progressive ministry. And so I felt a strong call to head to the South. And I grew up in South Georgia to really do Unitarian Universalist ministry. It's gotten unbelievable here in Oklahoma. And I say this, like, if it was a couple of years ago and I was still at the Cedar Lane in DC where I was serving, I honestly don't know if this would have been on my radar screen. And I'm disappointed in myself to say that, but it's the truth. Living here and seeing what our families are facing every single day from a legislature that's being motivated purely by hate at this point, and trying to diminish others for their own political power. It's constant, and I don't use this word lightly, but it's terrorizing our UU families. And so I've heard from multiple RE families of their plans to move from Oklahoma in our church come summer when the school year is done, and I'm connecting them with religious educators in their new area. And I have at least 5 or 6 other families who are actively considering or making preparations for an eventual move because they are terrified for their children's lives. So we have UU families who are fleeing. And as I was talking, I'm also chair of the Southwest LREDA group, which is the religious educators in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Memphis. And I've been hearing from my colleagues that's happening in all of their churches too. We have trans families that are leaving these churches and moving out of state for their children's safety. That's really hard to imagine if you're not living in one of these states. That we're just the terror and the constant fear our families are facing. And so we want to make sure everyone else knows about what's happening too. It's bad in Oklahoma. It is bad in many, many other states, not just Oklahoma. It's bad all over the southern area and Midwest area of our country. And so we're doing our best with LREDA to shine a light on this national wave of hate that's sweeping our nation. And although our board letter is focused about trans families and trans kids, just yesterday in Oklahoma, or 2 days ago in Oklahoma, they voted to ban all health care for trans folks and to eliminate insurance coverage, which is an interesting wrinkle, which we may talk about later with the UUA health insurance plan. And now, just yesterday in Oklahoma, Oklahoma has some lovely laws with the state legislature. They don't allow public testimony, for example. And they also have shell bills that they will switch out with something at the last minute with like a hateful piece of legislation. And so they just switched a shell bill last night to include a ban on recognizing like federal gay marriages. That's the intent. And so every possible avenue, every possible front, they're attacking on. And it's so incredibly hard and so incredibly draining. And we want to shine a light on this and get all of our, and the LREDA wants to get our whole association mobilized and fighting for our trans families, no matter where they are in the country. I'll pass it off to Aisha.
Thank you, Tim. I think one of the things I want to bring up, and part of the motivation for the LREDA board to write this letter, and we're inviting LREDA members to sign on to it, is to tangibly ask Unitarian Universalists especially, but those who support liberation and bodily autonomy and trans families especially, to do something. And there's a lot that can be done. But the thing that's been super frustrating, continues in this country since its founding, is this idea of social justice as an intellectual exercise. So this idea that we can talk about and have conversations with entities that are actively causing harm, causing people to die, causing people to harm themselves. And so we need to stop that. There's no common ground to be had with groups that are actively causing harm. So what can Unitarian Universalists do? Stop with the bullshit of having conversations and understand that there are people wanting to harm children, youth, and families. And, like we said, Roe v. Wade was just the beginning, overturning. And so what we can do is, what does it mean to be sanctuary congregations? What is it for families that are leaving red states? What does it mean to be part of a network to help trans youth and young adults escaping families that want to harm them, that are part of maybe evangelical or conservative movements? So these are tangible things that LREDA is calling on every Unitarian Universalist to do. I want to bring back Katharine and Kiana, Danae, DC, Michael, whoever else wants to jump in. I'm just frustrated at there's a thread going on in my Facebook page where someone's like, well, we need to be able to have the conversation. What fucking conversation are we having? Because that's what that's what led to the Civil War. There was lots of thought conversations about whether or not we should own fucking people. And when did that even end? It hasn't really ended, but at least the actual physical buying and selling of people stopped only with the Civil fucking War.
Aisha, slow down. I do not have my tea. I cannot. This is really hot and I'm thirsty. I want to say, sometimes I'm a seminarian and I'm at my internship, so my eyes get a little tunnely sometimes. So I want to thank Katharine, Tim, and LREDA for bringing this issue to me in a way that makes it tangible and makes it so that I can move around it. I can actually do something. And so because I have undiagnosed ADD, is there something I can do right now? Is there some money I can give? Is there a child who needs support? Is there a Girl Scout who needs somebody to buy cookies? Whatever it might be, what can we do that's tangible that helps right now, Tim? Because I don't have a lot of capacity, but I have a lot of compassion. So how can I step into the gap and do the work?
So some of this, we are all collectively brainstorming, and we're hoping this conversation we're sparking helps our collective brainstorming. I want to give you an example of what one church did for our church here in Oklahoma City. This is the Foothills Unitarian Church in Colorado. They saw me post in a colleague space about how I was worried about my congregants who are in the fight and my trans families who are getting so demoralized. And I'm worried, and I wanted to provide them a lift to keep them in the fight. They put together a video of colleagues and sent it out, but they also sent us a box that I received on Tuesday after I got back from the state capitol lobbying against that insurance ban that I mentioned earlier. And it was a box filled with about 190 cards of support for our congregation, for our congregants, and we've got an example up on the screen. I'll read it. Okay, UU. Foothills UU, support your determination to enable children to express themselves honestly as they feel they truly are. Know that you are not alone. From Polly. We have 180 of these messages, and they're all this moving, and some clearly made by the children and youth in their religious exploration small group classes at the church. And they, in a letter, they mentioned that as part of their worship service, they expressed gratitude, and this is what they chose to do that day. Folks, it has caused uniform tears among all of my trans families and among folks who are fighting these bills. We, folks at our church, are comparing it to what we received in Oklahoma City after the Murrah bombing in 1995. We are going to keep some of these to frame, to put up and keep at our church forever, like we have with some of the stuff from the Murrah bombing. And then we're going to be giving these out to our trans families, to our folks who are fighting, and we're going to be giving them to folks in our community who are connected to the wider Oklahoma City trans community so they can also get these notes of support from Foothills UU. This was a small congregation. I mean, this was a congregational activity that probably took an hour or two to organize, an hour or two to make happen on a Sunday morning, and it has changed lives in Oklahoma City. So this is one possibility that UU communities, UU congregations could take the lead from Foothills and look for a congregation in a state that is facing some of these laws and offer to send notes of support. Something as small as that can mean all of the world right now when it feels so incredibly isolating here when we're fighting these. Just that note of connection gives enough strength for us to keep fighting. It really does.
Oklahoma is dealing with a lot right now, and they're not the only folks dealing with a lot. You know, the governor of Florida, as we've discussed in other contexts and other things, is actively targeting trans children and youth, and going outside of the legislative process. So it's not even something that the folks in Florida can go to their legislators to stop. He's going through the state medical board to outlaw gender-affirming care for children and youth in Florida, and it's done in Florida, and so our folks in Florida need that care too. And I have to think that the notes are great. Like it fills my heart with love to think that you got that box, and just the support is meaningful and real. And we also have to be mobilizing for other actions that are directly opposing fascism and genocide. We have to be mobilizing to get our people the medicine that they need, that in ways that might not be legal. And I probably shouldn't say that out loud. But you know, we need to be mobilizing to help get people out of states where their lives are in danger. To play, and that's like no easy thing, right? It's not like everybody has the privilege to just pack up from Tulsa and move to Connecticut. Like people just don't have that privilege. So like it's going to need to be a collective effort of Unitarian Universalists all across the continent, all across the country.
You know, Michael, on that funding point, one of my hopes that I hope to see the UUA taking is the establishment of some kind of living tradition style fund. So for those who don't know, the Living Tradition Fund is a fund that's funded by donations that Unitarian Universalist religious professionals can access in times of crisis, in times of personal crisis. And I would love for us to see some kind of living tradition style fund that folks can donate to, that the UA can donate to, and that there's some sort of process for families who are fleeing, for UU families who are fleeing because of family persecution, to get some like $500 in moving help can make a big difference. Just something.
Yeah.
That's one of my big hopes. What do you think, Catherine?
Or networks for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And housing in other places,
and medicine.
Yeah.
So here's where the Canadian, I'm going to say the illegal thing because I live in the land of socialized medicine. But if you are somebody who has access to hormone replacement therapy in a way that is still permitted in your state, can you show up at your GP and say, I want testosterone or I want estrogen, and then find somebody who needs it? Right? We are in a situation where access to trans medical care, which is not just gender confirmation surgery, right?
Yes.
Trans medical care is much bigger than surgery. And we do have the opportunity to support one another in micro networks in this way around trans healthcare.
Yeah. I mean, I had a conversation with someone this morning about getting a prescription for testosterone in New York, which would be the most ridiculous thing to prescribe to me. But I'm sure I could convince a doctor to prescribe it to me, and then using that to get it to them.
Well, we have UU doctors.
I don't know how it's going to work.
Don't we have UU doctors? Like, don't we have UU doctors and nurse practitioners that can write prescriptions?
I want to chime in, and the hat that I want to wear is I'm thinking about if from two places is where I'm thinking my heart is hurting right now. That if I was a parent who, chose any state, Florida, Oklahoma, Minnesota, whatever the place might be, to raise my babies, and then having to make, after a horrific pandemic, after all of the racial violence, let's say you live in Michigan and you live in Flint and now you can't access water. I wonder about how all of those things stack up and how we show up on a Sunday morning still. How do I show up on Sunday when my entire sense of thrivehood is constantly being threatened? How do I show up as an authentic parent who loves my babies? And how hard it must be. Let's say I have grandparents or elders that I take care of and they can't move with me. And now I'm a sandwicher and I've got kids who I'm trying to love on and I've got elders who I need to care for. What do you do when you can't move, when you can't go somewhere else, when there is no other place? And my heart is hurting from that perspective, right? From that place of honoring that some of us, as somebody just said earlier, don't have the privilege, don't have the access, the means, don't have the can't. And how do we show up on a Sunday morning? And so my question as a minister in training is, how do we nurture those people and those families and those youth who show up on that Sunday morning, or Thursday night choir, or Saturday or Friday one night, because not all of our work happens on Sunday. So I want to ask the folks who either hold those identities or who do some of that work much more closely than I do, how do we as ministerial community show up for you in authentic and genuine ways?
I want to thank you for lifting up that sandwich problem. I was just talking with a congregant Wednesday night about this. Wednesday night, we're offering OWL right now, and we just finished offering the transgender inclusion congregations from the Transforming Heart Collective, which I can't encourage you enough to take and offer as well. And she was just relaying her fears that they feel like they need to move out of Oklahoma because of the Oklahoma policies around reproductive health right now for their daughters. But they have an elderly parent and they can't move yet. But they've got like their wish list, and they were talking with me about what towns have a good UU church, because they are going to move to a town with a UU church. That's good. Like that's what they're looking for to help narrow down where they're going to move. And just the fear and the struggles that family is having and making these really awful choices. It's just heartbreaking. Something that we've noticed, we've had a lot of visitors over the past couple of weeks, way more so than normal for a church our size. We think it's partly because of some of the work we're doing in the community around this. And folks are coming needing connection. They want a cup of coffee and to sit down and talk with someone who shares that value and cares about it. And that's what people are so desperate for. Because again, I mentioned how isolating it can feel right now, especially in Oklahoma. And being able to break that isolation and form connection is one of the most powerful acts that can happen. And so helping to form those connections in social time, and just, it's okay if we don't get to the curriculum that week in the Sunday school class, if they need to have a connection and feel like they belong. That's what comes first. I'm a big proponent of the Think Orange School of Religious Education philosophy. And one of the quotes I got from them is, what comes first, believing or belonging? And belonging comes first. And that's what we need to focus on right now, is making sure these folks feel like they belong somewhere, and that our Unitarian Universalist churches can be the place where they can belong. But we have to make sure our Unitarian Universalist churches are actually someplace they can belong. And so we've got some work to do.
Performative allyship gets us nowhere. Performative allyship I'm not here for that. If you sell tickets and let me know I'm going to the circus, don't bullshit me.
Yes.
And allyship is more than using my right pronouns or not touching my hair. If that's what you have, we're at performative and that's cute, but it's not going to get me to thriving. It's going to get me to survival till next Sunday when you do it again. So there's a huge difference in your behavior. Is it a short-term solution so your short-term discomfort is assuaged? Or is it a long-term solution so our collective liberation is assured? Now we need to quote that.
Say
That was
that.
good. Catherine,
Say
I want to make
that.
sure we don't forget you.
So I was just going to chime in with a couple of sort of starting places that if congregations are really looking to invest in supporting trans and queer families, do you have a Progress Pride flag prominently displayed in a place where it can be seen from the street? That would be my first question. Have you done any targeted adult religious education around trans kids, trans families, and about queer culture? If you have a story that happens during your worship service every Sunday, what is the makeup of the families that appear in the stories that you're telling? Right? Is every single story that you're telling a mom, a dad, and 2 kids? Are you telling stories that are about queer families? Are you telling stories that are about non-binary parents? Are you telling stories that are about polyamorous families? What is the representation that you're bringing to your everyday normal? And that is really one of the big places that we see the difference between performative allyship and an actual cultural congregational culture that is supportive of queer people and of trans families. And we need to think writ large about what our congregational culture is like if we really want to make a place where queer families feel welcome to come. And as Unitarian Universalist congregations, we have the theology to do it. We have the groundwork laid by who we are to make this happen and to really be welcoming, sheltering places for queer families, for trans families. And it's so sad to see so many of us falling short of that when we have all of the groundwork laid to do that. Are you offering adult owl? You know, take a look at your adult faith formation, because your kids are not setting your congregational culture. Your religious educator can work with your youth and your kids as much as they want, but it's the adults who are setting your congregational culture. And the best thing that you can do to support queer and trans kids is to surround them with adults who understand what they're going through and have the capacity to actually care for them.
We're also calling congregations to expand the diversities of their congregational libraries. And I was reflecting back on what's something that I, as a random UU, can do right now. You can find a great book that features trans, non-binary, or genderqueer characters, and buy it for your church library.
And just order the catalog from Flamingo Rampant and just put it on the shelf.
I was just about to say that.
Catalog and give it to your RE program. Because they'll sell you 20 books at a time of books that are intentionally inclusive of abilities and races and different kinds of families and different gender expressions, and they're just intentionally it's not just one. This is the trans book, and this is the.
If your church has a bookstore, get them a copy of that catalog too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the LREDA letter that we're hoping to send, we're inviting LREDA members to sign it. And then we'll send it. Tim and Catherine were having this conversation in real time, I believe, to UUA board, UUA leadership, and however we can send it as a mass email to congregations all over the continent, but especially obviously in the United States. I'd say that's the intention of the letter, to really bring to the forefront that as you use, this is part of our call to center liberation.
But it's also signing the letter is awesome. And I'm so glad that LREDA is taking leadership here. And if you're not a LREDA member, like, copy the letter and send it to your minister and your religious educator, and say, I'm willing to be a partner in moving our congregation forward on these issues. Like, your name doesn't have to be on the letter to move a congregation forward on these issues. If you're a minister or a religious educator and you're not a LREDA member, if you're not a religious educator and not a LREDA member, you should be. But if you're a minister out there, or a music director or an administrator, and you're not a LREDA member and you want to help move your congregation forward, you don't have to sign the letter to move your congregation forward on these issues. You just need to read it and do what it says. So like I want to lift up LREDA for taking leadership here and say we don't have to sign the letter to make change.
Can I? Yes, and I'm gonna shift the conversation a little bit, because one of the things that I've heard kind of just from the general public is so where the folks who are wanting to cause horror and harm are brilliant, is there, and I mean horrifically brilliant, not in a good way, but just what they're tapping into is, oh, they're doing this to children, as if there's some kind of movement that leaves out the autonomy of who children know who they are. So I think I want to kind of move this a little bit, because I know for UUs who are, you know, maybe of a certain age, maybe socialized a certain way, or like true who are cisgender, because I've heard folks ask in genuine ways, like, well, what if kids change their minds? I put that in quotes. What if, you know, this is forced on them? And like, nothing's forced. What we're doing as a community and as people who want to center liberation is listening to people who know themselves, no matter what age they are. None of this is happening lightly and without intention. And we're simply wanting people to affirm who they are in their fullness. So however folks feel comfortable speaking to that, but I do think that's an important, like, we need to diffuse this bullshit that's what the fucking bullshit governor of Florida thinks well, he doesn't think anything. He doesn't give a crap about anybody but himself. So this is not at all any kind of altruistic bullshit. It's just fascism at its finest. But I want to speak to that. Go ahead, Kiana Dene.
I was DC, were you trying to raise your hand, friend? I want to make sure I don't cut you off. Okay. So here's the jam.
I got nothing nice to say.
Here's the jam. Nobody forces kids to be them authentic self. Kids are in a safe space where they are able to voice and understand their autonomy. So they're able to say, when I'm in my body, this is what I feel. You can trust and believe no one in a medical community and no one in a parenting role is saying, let's go to the surgeon today because you've expressed how you feel in your body. There is this narrative that we go from a child saying, when I do thing A, it feels good to me, to a hospital. That is not the leap that is taking place. If they understood the medical circus, hoopla, holes, jumps, gymnastics routine that has to be followed to go from I feel A to having any affirmation of that outside of a pronoun, they would lose their damn minds. There's people in this country who can't get a cold without whining and have the audacity to come at children and families who are willing to go along with the process of gender affirming, not change, gender affirming behaviors and ways of being in the world. And I have to look at them and say, baby, I saw you get the sniffles and thought you was going to have to write a will. I don't know what you do. Like, do you know what it's like to have to go into a doctor's office every once a year and say to them, this is how I feel in my body. Will you please give me medication for the next 12 months that will help me live my life in the way that is the most affirming, and then have to prove it with psychological tests, physical examination, and probably more than one space? Do you think that that's an easy task? Do you think that parents who are running around trying to take their kids to Zoom school for the last 2 years are like, let's run down to the doctor's office right now because we have time for that? No. As parents, as people who love other people in their autonomy, we hear, we listen, we respect, we follow through, we follow up, we follow the process. And then one day If we're lucky, if we're in a gender affirming state, if we have medical care and access, if we have time, if we have affirming family, then we walk into a doctor's office after all of that and they say, here's a little thing we're going to put in your arm. And when it's in there, it means that your voice won't drop and your testicles won't drop. So that if you do change your mind or something happens in the next 3 to 5 years, you're on a course. Not that you've arrived, that you're on a course that will lead you to where you want to be. And we'll talk about it in 4 years. That's what we're talking about, y'all. We're not talking about some extravagant medical procedure. We're talking about being able to check a box for Girl Scouts so that you can go to Girl Scouts. We're talking about being able to wear a one-piece swimsuit instead of shorts and a t-shirt in gym class. That is the level at which we are affirming people. That's it. And if you don't have enough compassion and understanding of affirmation in your own life to be able to want to translate that to a child or an elder or anyone who recognizes how they've been living doesn't align with how they want to be in the world, then we're not having the same conversation and we're not living the same faith. I have 8 principles that I live into. Actually, I have 8 values which center love, but that's y'all not ready for that conversation. So what I'm saying to you is what I get up for every Sunday morning, what I get up and do with the people who I love, the people who I am in faith community with, is affirm how they love and who they are. And the moment I can no longer do that, I am disconnected from my community and I refuse to be that. I refuse to wake up on Sunday morning to be disconnected and I won't do it. And my panties are a little tight. I'm not going to lie to you. This is a sensitive topic for me because I love too many people who don't get affirmed in who they are. And I love too many people who are affirmed in who they are and they're not ready to give that up because it makes somebody uncomfortable. And saying they and them made me uncomfortable. So now I'm going to disavow this entire community that has thrived in existence since the dawn of time.
And I think it's important to be real about this. I mean, one of the ways that Unitarian Universalism saves lives is by helping people be exactly who they are and be loved. It saves lives. And people have their knickers in a twist and are clutching their pearls over puberty blockers, which are medicines that pause the onset of puberty in minors. And what we need to understand is that puberty blockers are reversible, right? So Kiana and I talked about something being implanted in an arm that prevents the onset of male puberty. If that's taken out, puberty happens, right? And it's reversible and temporary. But the things that are permanent are an understanding that you have people who love you for exactly who you are. That makes a permanent change in your life. Forcing someone to go through puberty in a way that is not affirming of who they are is sometimes permanent. Especially testosterone-based puberty makes permanent changes to a body that are very hard, not impossible to overcome, but very hard. And it's just setting people up for more challenges down the road. And a content warning here, folks, because I think it's necessary to say this. The rates at which transgender people, especially transgender youth and children, die by suicide because they are not affirmed in who they are many, many, many times the rates of the cisgender population, many, many times. And you know what's permanent, folks? Death is a permanent situation. And so it is, we are called upon as Unitarian Universalists to save people's lives. To live like it's not like we're saving some soul that might or might not exist from some hell that might or might not exist. We are saving people's lives by affirming who they are and by loving them for exactly who they are. And that love, that experience of love is permanent. and we teach it. We teach that way of loving people in our religious education programs. We have a whole lifespan faith development curriculum series devoted to teaching that way of loving people. That I'm an author in the Our Whole Lives curriculum, at least for now, until they take my name off Our Whole Lives for Young Adults when they revise it. But Tim, I know you probably have some things to say about how OWL, Our Whole Lives, affects interfaces with us and affects our children, like how we do this in children's RE.
Our Whole Lives is one of the most essential programs your UU congregation or community could be offering right now. I want to lift up that, if your congregation is already offering the full set of OWL classes, it's very easy to pat yourselves on the back and think you're done, right? You want to make sure if you're already offering the full set of OWL classes, what's next? What are you doing next? So don't get complacent. And if you're not offering the full set of OWL courses, what do you need to do to offer the full suite of OWL courses? It might take a couple of years of planning to be able to get the facilitators trained and the money identified to where you're going to be able to train the facilitators, etc. One of our calls in the Open LREDA letter, the Open LREDA letter already has over 100 signatures from religious educators across the nation. It's been out for 24 hours. And one of the reasons why we wanted to do that is to also show geographic solidarity with from across the country here. But with OWL, we're calling on congregations to also be intentional about offering OWL in their wider communities and not just bounded by their congregational walls. Maybe there are lots of programs out there. In fact, if you're interested in hearing more about one, you can come to the FOS lecture at General Assembly that LREDA is putting on, where OWL in the community is going to be one of the topics of our conversation. And what can your congregation do to help offer OWL in the wider community? Because in the same states that are trying to ban transgender care, they have also banned sex education in schools. And so this is all united. I see a quick question from Janine that I will lift up. A bill number in Oklahoma to be on the watch for is HB 2177. That's House Bill 2177. That is the bill that is banning transgender care for everyone in Oklahoma, not just minors, and bans insurance companies from covering gender-affirming care in Oklahoma, which I think is going to be ruled unconstitutional, but we'll see about that. The local rights organization in Oklahoma leading the charge is named Freedom Oklahoma. If you go to their website and social media, they have a very active bill tracker that's tracking the 30 to 40 anti-queer bills before the Oklahoma State Legislature right now and where they are in process. And I will say the Site of Love also shared a link, if you're not in Oklahoma, to be able to go look for the status of bills in your state. So check out the Site of Love's Facebook page, and they shared a link to a bill tracker as well.
Hey, everybody. I know that we're getting to the end of the hour, and I'm being bossy. I'm doing it. I want to say something. This past week, Dwayne Wade spoke up about his daughter, and he shared some amazingly beautiful words about her. And I'm going to say something tender. Hold yourself. There is a narrative that Black and brown folks don't have love for their trans children. There is a narrative we're homophobic as a whole, except we're gay. So I get confused in this narrative. But I want to make sure that I say out loud that trans identity and trans affirming supporting trans youth isn't a white thing. It's not something white people do. It's something we do because we're humans and we care for our children. I will go to your doctor's appointment before I go to your funeral. And I will say that over anyone's body, because that's what I believe. So I just want to make sure that in this conversation, we don't miss that piece that not only do folks need affirmingness around their transness, sometimes folks need racially specific, racially sensitive care around their identity and transition and care. It is not just hard to walk into a church as a trans family, but a Black trans family, right? Can you I don't have tea for that. But what I'm saying to you all is Two things I want to make sure I leave on the floor. One, Black and brown people love our trans children just as much as any other people. We love our trans children, and you may not know they're trans because we love them so much. That's who they were. We moved on. We didn't make posters and we didn't make flyers. They're just here and they're our babies. So know that. And then secondly, as communities, know that people come in as layered people, right? Trans, disabled, needing mobility devices, polyamorous families come in layer, we're cakes, and we're not just the trans family, we're not just the Black families. So please make sure that when you are seeking out ways to affirm anyone who is not, wayward Christian and white who shows up at your door, that you're doing it in a way that honors their entire humanity and not just the parts that feel good to affirm in this cycle of excitement. And I don't say that to be trite. I'm saying we're on trans children right now, but we know they change the game quite often, and so something else will catch our attention because that's part of the game, is to keep the pieces moving. So with that, I'm going to stop talking for the rest of the day, but this has been an adventure and it's been a healing balm for my heart.
So I would love to just give a shout out to all of the religious educators and trained OWL staff who have spent the last 10 plus years doing community-driven collaborative adaptations of the existing OWL program to make sure that it is actually trans affirming. The OWL program writ large is a pretty big ship to steer in our denomination, and getting updates published has been an uphill battle. The new K-1 curriculum, I believe, has just been published, and we are waiting for the continued rollover and updates to all of the other OWL level curricula. And I just want to make sure that people know that OWL is not, it's not a one-shot solution to these problems, especially with the work that does need to go into it to make sure that what is being presented is really in line with the kind of love and support and welcome that our trans kids and trans families deserve. And this is not to shame anybody who's involved in the production of the updates. We know what a process it is to do that work thoughtfully. It's not something that anybody wants to rush out to publication. And I have every confidence that the publication team behind the updates it's taken a long time because they're doing it right. But it is taken a long time, and just wanted to shout out all of those religious educators who are taking that critique to heart and are doing the hard work of making sure that these programs really are welcoming folks and are really supporting folks in the way that we want them to be supported. And the last thing that I just wanted to chime in, I'm glad we got a little bit of an explanation about puberty blockers, but like all of these things, and like Aisha said at the top of the hour, it is not about puberty blockers, just like it's not about bathrooms, just like it was never about water fountains. That yes, certainly there are people who have been fed misinformation about medically what puberty blockers do, but nobody who is sponsoring a piece of legislation is going to be swayed by improved medical information, because it's not about misunderstanding the medical information. It is about power and about control, and it's about the decimation of a culture. And that was, I think Kiana Dene touched on that earlier, but queer culture and trans culture is a thing. It is not a subset of other cultures within our world. It is its own culture, and it is under attack.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Some people in the chat have also asked about the Welcoming Congregation program, and similar to what Catherine just said about OWL, the Welcoming Congregation program is also not a one and done. It is an ongoing process of evaluating and reevaluating and educating and staying on top of what the latest understandings are in your congregation, and a commitment to staying on top of that moving forward. And so maybe you did it, that doesn't mean you're done with it. Like maybe you need a refresher, maybe you need trans inclusion in congregations offered by the Transforming Hearts Collective, an excellent course. Maybe you need
It's not a merit badge.
it's not a merit badge. It is an ongoing process of learning and education and doing better. So
I'd like to say a little something. I've been quiet this whole hour. Thank you to LREDA for doing this work and taking the lead. For trans ministers, it's I think extra hard to have to show up and care for a congregation full of people who are scared and worried about their children, worried about their own adult status, worried about access to medicine. I mean, here in Pennsylvania, we don't seem to have too awful much horrible happening at the legislative level. We do have a governor who's sworn to veto anything that's really shitty. So that's encouraging, but that doesn't change, who my neighbors are, with their flags extolling the virtues of the twice impeached guy with the spray tan. I guess what I would say is, like, this has been really great here, this wonderful advocacy, and the passion and the love, and the care. And Michael's words are true. Like, Unitarian Universalism saves lives. Unitarian Universalism provided a place for me to come in as a horribly wounded train wreck, and eventually become a moderately healed, not quite train wreck of a minister, who's able to do things as my whole genuine, authentic self. And I can't think of any place else where that could have happened like this, So I don't know. We're after the hour. I guess maybe I should. Do you want me to wrap up? I can do it. All right. So next week, first off, I want to thank Catherine and Tim for being such awesome, and Aisha, and for being such awesome longtime LREDA leaders, and for taking the lead on this thing. This is super, super powerful. And thank you for making the time to be with us. Tim, we're thinking of you down there in Oklahoma and holding you in our hearts, and you and your people and your kids. And I want to invite people to come back next week when we're going to hear from a couple of sexuality educators and activists to talk about sexual agency and gender and autonomy in a post-Roe world. And I will say that one of them, Robin Wilson Beatty, is one of the authors of our OWL curriculum. She authored the part on disability and sexuality. So, and Tim has just posted 7 more people have signed the letter during this broadcast. So thank you all. We will see you next week. Be well, stay safe. You're too important to treat badly.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.